An old black man in ragged clothes walked into the Chase Rockview Bank and quietly declared that this bank is mine to the crowd. Immediately, there was a burst of mocking laughter, and the security guard moved towards him to chase him out. But when he slowly opened the old bag on his shoulder, all the laughter turned to dead silence. Stunned. The rain had just begun to fall, soft, persistent droplets tapping the glass fade of the downtown bank like a quiet warning. Inside, the Chase Rockview branch gleamed with corporate precision, polished marble floors, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead, and a lobby filled with neatly dressed clients and sharp-suited bankers who didn't expect their day to be anything other than ordinary. But the moment Logan stepped through the door, everything began to shift. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, the weight of his age resting in the way he walked, the way he breathed. His coat was old, its brown fabric stained and fraying at the edges. His shoes, no more than worn leather, and torn soles made dull echoes on the floor. Slung over his shoulder was a faded canvas bag, stitched and patched in places where time had refused to be kind. People noticed him immediately. A white woman in pearls and a cream coat instinctively drew her handbag closer. Two young bank tellers behind the counter exchanged a quick smirk. A child tugged at his father's sleeve and asked in a whisper, "Why that old man looks like he's lost?" The father didn't answer. He was too busy casting Logan a look of suspicion, as though the very sight of a black man in threadbare clothes was a threat to order. Logan said nothing. He didn't look left or right. He just walked, slow and steady, until he reached the center of the bank lobby. There he stopped. For a long moment, he simply stood still. The noise of the bank, the chime of transactions, the murmurs of customers, the crisp tap of keys continued without pause. But then, in a voice quiet but steady, Logan spoke. "This bank," he said, "belongs to me." The words hung in the air like smoke. For half a second, silence followed, pure and thick. Then a ripple of laughter began. It started at the front desk with one of the tellers. Then it moved to a seated client, chuckling behind his newspaper. Soon the entire room was laughing, not cruelly, but dismissively, the way people laugh when they're too polite to mock you to your face. Near the door, the bank's security guard, a broad-shouldered white man named Michael, took a step forward. He wore his authority like a uniform itself, back straight, chin up, hand resting loosely on the holster at his hip. "Sir," Michael said with a smirk, "I think you're confused. This isn't a shelter. This is a place of business." Logan turned slowly, his eyes meeting Michael's. "I'm not confused," he said calmly. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here to take back what was stolen." Michael's jaw tightened. "You need to leave, now." But Logan didn't move. Instead, he reached for his bag, slowly, deliberately, every motion heavy with the weight of decades, and placed it at his feet. The crowd grew quiet again. Something in his manner changed the room. He untied the flap, reached in, and drew out an old, yellowed ledger, the kind banks hadn't used in 50 years. From the side of the room, Marvin, the bank's manager, had been watching. A sharp, efficient man in his 40s, Marvin believed in systems, rules, and the sanctity of record-keeping. This interruption, an old man making absurd claims in front of clients, was an inconvenience he couldn't allow. But then he saw the name on the cover of the ledger, Chase Bank, 1950, and below it, written in fading ink, Elijah C.K. Kirby, a name Marvin had never seen, but suddenly could not ignore. "Where did you get that?" Marvin asked, stepping forward. Logan looked at him, voice calm as ever. "I didn't get it," he said. "I wrote it." The laughter had vanished now. Only eyes remained wide, uncertain, and fixed on the old man in the center of the room. "This bank was built with my hands, my sweat, and my savings. But I was pushed out, forgotten, rewritten, because men in power decided that a black man could never own something this big. Michael stepped forward again, his voice harder. You need to leave or I'll have you removed. Logan didn't flinch. Instead, he held up a worn bill, an old Chase note bearing a logo long since retired. I'm not leaving, he said softly, until the truth is heard. And for the first time in decades, silence fell. Not the silence of indifference, but of reckoning. The kind of silence that comes just before a storm 50 years in the making. And Logan stood at its center. For a long second, the world inside the Chase Rockview branch held its breath. Logan stood still, his frail frame like a pillar of quiet defiance. His eyes dark, unwavering, swept across the room. The laughter that once bounced off marble floors had evaporated, leaving only a silence laced with discomfort. The polished suits, the tight lips, the forced politeness, all of it now strained under the weight of something deeper, something real. This isn't a stunt, Logan said quietly, his fingers resting on the canvas bag that now sat at his feet like a sleeping companion. This is history. Michael, the security guard, shifted uncomfortably near the entrance, hands still resting on his gun. He wasn't used to this. Order was his comfort zone. Control was his weapon. But Logan had neither raised his voice nor stepped out of line. And yet, Michael could feel something in the air twisting, slipping from his grip. Sir, I asked you to leave once already, Michael snapped, tone sharper now. I won't ask again. But Logan didn't flinch. Instead, he bent down slowly, his hands trembling with age but guided by certainty. He opened the bag. First came the ledgers, a stack of them worn, leather-bound pages yellowed and crinkled with time, each one marked with the year, 1948, 1949, 1950. The first 3 years Chase Bank ever operated in Rockview. Then came the bills, bundles of currency wrapped in cloth, bands, old Chase Bank emblems printed on the edges, the kind of money no one had seen in decades. Each bill was a relic, carrying not just a value but a time, a truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Customers leaned closer. Even Marvin, the stoic manager with the pressed collar and immaculate tie, took a hesitant step forward. Logan spoke again, voice even and deliberate. I kept it all, he said, gently lifting a ledger with both hands as if it were sacred scripture. Because someday, someone would need to know the truth about who really built this place. Marvin's brow furrowed. He had spent years poring over the bank's archives, memorizing every name in the official records. But Logan's name, Elijah C.K. Kirby, it had never appeared, not once. Not in the board ledgers, not in the corporate histories, not in any version of the story that had been told. And yet, that signature, written in ink now faded to brown, appeared in ledger after ledger, accompanied by figures, schedules, approvals, business strategies in careful cursive. You say you founded this bank? Marvin asked, his voice low, trying to control the edge in his tone. Logan nodded. I built it with my partner, John Williams, in 1948. We took out loans under our names, brought in investors. But then, when the money started to flow and the building began to rise, John decided the bank couldn't be led by a black man. He conspired with others, changed the records, paid off attorneys. My name was scrubbed from everything. The words hung there, heavy. For a long time, Marvin said nothing. He just stared at the ledger in Logan's hand, then at the others inside the bag. Michael, still trying to hold the line, stepped closer and raised his voice. This is absurd. These papers could be fake. You expect us to believe all this because you walk in here with an old bag and some dusty notebooks? You think this is about belief? Logan asked calmly, meeting Michael's glare. This is about proof, and proof speaks for itself. At that moment, one of the younger employees behind the counter, Emery, small-framed, sharp-eyed, and usually the quietest in the room, stepped forward. Her heels clicked lightly against the floor as she crossed to where Logan stood. Without a word, she bent down and picked up one of the weathered bills. It was soft in her hand. Faded, yes, but unmistakably stamped with a Chase seal that hadn't been used since the mid-century. She turned it over, looked at Logan, and then walked over to the counter. Carefully, with quiet reverence, she set it down. I believe him, Emery said softly, her voice clear enough to be heard by all. The bank fell into complete stillness. Even Marvin looked momentarily stunned. Then another employee, Jack, the same teller who had snickered when Logan walked in, walked forward, face red with shame. He didn't speak, just picked up a second bill from the pile, walked it over, and placed it gently beside Emery's. I'm sorry, he muttered, and then came another, and another. One by one, employees crossed the lobby, not out of obligation, but out of conscience, each of them picking up a piece of Logan's past, a piece of a truth that no one had ever told them. They placed the items down before him, like an offering, a gesture of recognition. Michael stood frozen. His confidence, once loud and forceful, now felt small, distant. Y'all have lost your damn minds, he barked suddenly, his voice cracking under pressure. This is nonsense. It's not real. It's not. But even as he spoke, his voice faded. No one was looking at him anymore. Every eye in the room had shifted to Logan, to the documents, to the reality now uncoiling at their feet. Logan reached back into his bag once more. This time, what he pulled out was different, wrapped in oilskin, tied with twine, a thick stack of legal documents, folded and weathered but perfectly preserved. He opened them slowly, letting the pages fall open like petals of a flower long frozen in time. These, he said, are the original partnership agreements, the founding documents, signed by me and John Williams. He flipped to a signature page. 2 names, 2 signatures. Only one of them still existed in the bank's history. Logan looked to Marvin, who had now crossed the lobby, staring intently at the page, his lips parted, his eyes scanning line after line. What he saw wasn't just surprising, it was earth-shattering. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a whisper. This can't be. Logan didn't press him. He didn't need to. The truth was in Marvin's hands now, inked in the margins, embossed with forgotten seals, echoing louder than any accusation could. The truth had arrived in the lobby of Chase Bank not with fury or vengeance, but in the quiet dignity of a man who had waited a lifetime to be heard. And now, he was. The room had shifted. Where once there had been the smug rhythm of routine transactions, polite nods, whispered judgment, now there was only silence, not peace, not stillness, but a charged, waiting quiet, the kind that hangs heavy in the air before something unspoken finally breaks. Logan stood at the center of it all, his hands aged but steady, his eyes clear and resolute. At his feet lay history, cracked ledgers, fading documents, and stacks of long-forgotten money bearing the dusty seal of a bank that had tried to erase him. Across from him, Marvin held the proof trembling, slightly beneath the weight of the pages he was flipping through. His eyes darted between signatures, seals, and the bold black ink that bore witness to a past no one wanted to remember. He knew it was real. Every instinct in his body told him so. Logan's name was there, not just once, but over and over next to founding dates, early withdrawals, loan approvals, strategic plans. Not a ghost, not a myth, a man, a founder, erased. Beside him, Michael, arms stiff, jaw clenched, watched with a building storm behind his eyes. His hand still hovered near the holster on his belt, fingers twitching in the subtle language of control. Authority, fear. "How do we even know these documents are legit?" Michael said, louder than before, trying to catch the eyes of those now looking away from him. "Anyone could have forged this. This old man could be conning all of you." No one responded. Michael's voice now sounded out of place. Too loud. Too sharp. Like a firecracker in a church. Logan didn't react. Instead, he addressed Marvin directly, his voice soft but unwavering. "You see it now, don't you?" he asked. "You see what they did?" Marvin didn't answer immediately. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, torn between two kinds of falling. One was into the comfort of silence and safety. The other into the truth. "I see it," Marvin finally said, voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, Logan just looked at him. Then, with the dignity that had never left him, not in the face of mockery, nor prejudice, nor decades of silence, he nodded. "I'm not here for revenge," he said. "I came back because the lie grew too big, too loud, and I couldn't let it be the only thing left behind when I'm gone." Michael scoffed. "This is ridiculous. All of it. You're going to take the word of some old man over your own institution? Over your career?" But Marvin wasn't listening to Michael anymore. His eyes were locked on the documents, on the name Elijah C.K. Kirby, on the emblems, signatures, and details that no forger could have faked without living them. He felt a tremor in his hand, the same hand that had once signed off on million-dollar accounts. The same hand that had written glowing reviews about the Matthews family's legacy in the local press. That hand was shaking now, because the truth didn't just call into question the past, it threatened everything in the present. The Matthews family, the entire foundation of the branch, his job, his name, his safety. "They'll come after you," Michael said suddenly, his voice like a knife cutting through Marvin's thoughts. "The Matthews family, their lawyers, their money. You think they're going to let this stand?" Marvin's silence was the answer, because he already knew, and the weight of that knowing made his breath catch. Logan watched him with a quiet kind of understanding. He had seen that look before, on judges, on lawyers, on boardroom executives who knew the truth but chose to look away from it because it didn't serve them. But Marvin was still standing there, clutching the papers, still listening, still deciding. And then Michael moved. His voice snapped like a whip. "That's enough." He stepped forward fast, hand on the holster. "This man is disrupting business. I'm calling the police." There was a moment, a split second, where fear returned to the room like a shiver. Clients shifted in their seats. One elderly woman quietly grabbed her purse. A teenager near the door stepped back, eyes wide. Logan didn't move, but Marvin did. "Michael," he said sharply, his voice firm for the first time. "Don't." Michael stopped, his hand still dangerously close to the weapon on his side. "What did you say?" "I said don't," Marvin repeated louder. "Put your hand down. Now." Michael turned to face him, disbelief written across every tense line in his face. "You're choosing him over me?" "I'm choosing what's right," Marvin said simply. Michael's lips curled. "You're going to burn your entire future down over a story that no one even remembers?" "It's not about what people remember," Marvin replied, voice steel. "It's about what actually happened." A beat of silence. Then Logan took a step forward, not toward Michael, but toward Marvin. He looked at the young bank manager with tired eyes, but not defeated ones. You have a choice, he said. Right here, right now. You can bury this again. Pretend you never saw it. Pretend I never existed. And no one will blame you. But you'll carry that with you for the rest of your life. He paused. Or you can be the man who lets the truth breathe again, who stops the lie, even if it costs you. Marvin looked back at the documents in his hand, at Logan's face, then at the employees standing in the corners of the room, Emery, Jack, and others, waiting, quiet, hopeful. He closed the ledger slowly, his heart pounding, and then he nodded. I'll take this to the board, he said. All of it, every document, every ledger. Michael shook his head like a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. You'll regret this, he muttered. You'll be out of a job in a week. Maybe, Marvin said, but I'll be able to look in the mirror. Logan smiled. It was small, tired but real. Michael stepped back, defeated for now, his hand off the holster but his eyes still burning with disbelief. He had lost more than authority. He had lost certainty, the kind built on silence and denial. As Marvin gathered the documents, Logan turned away slowly and reached for his bag again. This time he packed with care, placing each item gently back into its home, like sacred pieces of memory finally being honored. The room remained still. No one moved. No one dared to speak, because something profound had just unfolded here. A moment that cracked the surface of a lie too long preserved. And though no sirens blared, no headlines screamed, everyone knew. The reckoning had begun. The next morning, the Chase Rockview branch opened its glass doors to a different kind of silence. It wasn't the comfortable, clockwork quiet of business as usual. It was the silence that follows a tremor, the kind where people speak in hushed voices, unsure what might shift if they're too loud. The kind where every eye avoids another, because they all remember what happened yesterday, and no one quite knows what to do next. At the heart of that silence sat Marvin. He hadn't slept. Not really. The night had been filled with restless pacing, a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing, and a heart that beat too loudly even in the stillness of his own apartment. When he finally did close his eyes, he didn't dream he remembered. Logan's face, Michael's rage, Emery's voice, soft but steady. I believe him. And the papers real, undeniable, devastating. Marvin had read them over and over, every signature slicing deeper. The past he thought he knew was crumbling, and the future he had worked so hard to build now felt like it was built on sand. He had called the regional board that night. He had told them everything, and he had heard the first tremor in their voices, the name Matthews, echoing like a warning through the line. Be careful, Marvin, one of them had whispered. Don't do anything rash. But Marvin had already done it. He had believed Logan, and now he would have to live with that choice. By mid-morning, the door to Marvin's office swung open. The assistant barely knocked. Sir, there's a visitor for you, from the Matthews Group. Marvin's stomach dropped. He stood slowly, smoothing the creases in his jacket with fingers that trembled. Send them in, he said, his voice steady, though nothing inside him was. Seconds later, a woman in a tailored black suit entered. Her name was Bonnie Matthews, and Marvin knew of her long before she ever set foot in his branch. A fourth-generation heiress of the Matthews banking empire. Ruthless, brilliant, and utterly cold. She didn't offer a handshake, just walked in, sat down, and placed a folder on the desk between them. This won't take long, she said without preamble. I'm here on behalf of the Matthews family. Marvin said nothing. Bonnie opened the folder. Inside was a printed transcript, a summary of the incident, witness statements, and a single sheet marked Notice of Review, Conduct and Compliance Violation. We have serious concern, she said, her tone clipped, each word sharp as glass. You allowed a disgruntled trespasser to cause a public disturbance. You gave credibility to unverifiable documents. And worst of all, you let your staff participate in what could now become a public scandal. Marvin kept his eyes on the folder. "And what if the documents are real?" he asked. Bonnie's jaw tightened. "Then we will handle it internally, discreetly." "He was erased," Marvin said quietly. "They took everything from him. His name, his life's work. We have the proof." Bonnie didn't flinch. "We have lawyers." The silence that followed was deafening. Marvin leaned back slightly. For a moment, he thought of saying nothing, of letting this moment pass with polite deflection and procedural response. But then he saw Logan's eyes in his mind again, the eyes of a man who had carried truth for decades, waiting for someone to listen. "No," Marvin said. Bonnie blinked. "No," she repeated. "I won't bury this," Marvin continued. "I'm submitting all of Logan's evidence to the Legal Review Board. If that costs me this job, so be it." Bonnie stood. "I'm warning you," she said, her voice low. "The Matthews family does not tolerate disloyalty. You think this is about one man's justice? It's about an empire, and you're threatening to burn it down over a man with a bag full of old paper." Marvin stood too. "I'd rather lose my position than lose my soul." They stared at each other for a beat. Marvin, exhausted but resolute. Bonnie, expression carved from stone. Then she gathered the folder and walked out without another word. By the afternoon, the news had spread. Whispers danced through cubicles like sparks. "He's really doing it. He's not backing down." Emery approached Marvin during a brief lull, her face both worried and proud. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "They're coming after you, aren't they?" He nodded. "They already are." "I'm with you," she said without hesitation. "Whatever happens." Then Jack stepped in behind her. Then another teller. Then a woman from accounting. No one made speeches. No one raised fists. They just stood there quiet but united. And in their silence, Marvin found a strange, powerful kind of strength. But not everyone was with him. Michael, who had been conspicuously absent all day, suddenly appeared near the end of the shift. He stood in the hallway outside Marvin's office, arms crossed, his usual air of confidence now replaced with something sharper. He didn't knock, just entered. "You made a big mistake," Michael said flatly. "I did what was right," Marvin replied. "You did what was stupid," Michael snapped. "You don't win this kind of fight. You survive it, and you survive it by staying silent." Marvin met his eyes. "You think silence is strength, but it's cowardice." Michael took a step forward. "You don't understand how this works. The Matthews own half the city. They've kept this bank alive. You go against them, you don't just lose your job, you lose everything." "And if I stay silent," Marvin said, "I lose myself." Michael shook his head and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. But Marvin didn't flinch, because something inside him had already changed. That night, Marvin went home and typed out a letter. Not a resignation, not yet. It was addressed to the board. But not just the regional office. He sent it to Chase National, attached with scanned copies of Logan's documents, full transcripts of the day's events, and a closing statement. "This isn't just a question of history, it's a question of truth. If this institution was built on the back of injustice, then we have a duty not just to the present, but to the past. We cannot continue to profit off a legacy that was stolen. My conscience will not allow me to ignore what I have seen." He hit send, then sat there for a long time, staring at the quiet flicker of his screen. The war had begun, not with weapons, not with headlines, but with something far more dangerous, the truth. And Marvin knew he wouldn't be the same man when this ended. The story didn't stay inside the walls of Chase Rockview for long. By the following morning, Logan's name was no longer just whispered in the halls of the bank. It was making its way across town. The local paper ran a small column with a headline that asked more questions than it answered. Did Rockview's most trusted bank erase a black founder? It might have gone unnoticed, just another obscure piece lost in the sea of daily headlines, if not for the photo. Someone had snapped it during that moment of stillness when Logan stood with his hand resting on the old bank ledger, surrounded by torn bills, weathered documents, and a room full of stunned employees. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even pleading. They were simply true, and in that expression, something pierced through. By noon, the photo had gone viral, across community forums, across inboxes, across social feeds. A single image began doing what words had failed to for over 50 years: make people care. At the branch, things began to change fast. Marvin watched as a quiet storm began building, not from executives or lawyers, but from the people. Calls started pouring in, not threats, not complaints, but questions. A woman from the east side of town called to say she remembered her grandfather speaking about a man named Elijah Kirby. Said he once ran a community fund that helped black families buy homes when no one else would give them loans. A man who had worked the construction on the original Chase building in the 1950s sent in a photo faded and torn, but showing two men, one white and one black, shaking hands in front of the foundation. On the back, scribbled in ink, John and Elijah, day one. More photos came, more letters, more voices. People were waking up, and they weren't just angry, they were ashamed. Logan didn't know the photo had gone viral until Emery told him. She found him sitting on a park bench, the same canvas bag beside him like a faithful shadow. You're everywhere now, she said, holding up her phone. Logan squinted at the screen, the light reflecting in his tired eyes. It's just a photo, he murmured. It's more than that, Emery replied softly. You've become something they can't ignore anymore. He looked away for a moment, watching a child ride a bicycle nearby, laughter filling the air. Then he nodded once. I never wanted fame, he said. Just truth. Just my name returned to the place they buried it. Back at the bank, Marvin stood taller. The weight hadn't lifted, but something else had arrived in its place. A kind of clarity. He had made his choice, and now the world had started to listen. The board hadn't responded yet. The Matthews family was quiet for now, but truth was no longer a secret sealed in dusty ledgers and yellowed pages. It was in inboxes, in memories, in photographs pulled from shoeboxes and attics. In the eyes of a community that realized they had celebrated a legacy built on a lie. And somewhere amid it all, Logan sat still, not as a man seeking revenge or applause, but as someone who had waited a lifetime to be heard. The world had turned its back on him once. Now it was turning back, and this time, it was listening. Sometimes history isn't just written in books, it's hidden in silence, buried beneath decades of power, prejudice, and fear. But the truth, it doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits in the hands of those who refuse to let it die. Logan wasn't just a man with a bag of old papers. He was a man with a story the world tried to forget, a name they erased, a legacy they buried under marble floors and polished lies. But one moment of courage, one act of standing still in the face of mockery, was enough to shake the silence. His story reminds us that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly, weathered by time, carrying nothing but the weight of truth. And when someone chooses to listen, everything changes. So ask yourself, if truth knocked on your door today, old, trembling, and tired, would you open it? Would you face what's uncomfortable to protect what's right? Because the legacy we leave begins with the truth we're brave enough to defend.